Hi everyone, my name is Pearl and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today I will be making a 1800s ball gown. It is for my camp, and for the series it will be the final dress of the series, meaning the next video will be the final video, and it will contain making the accessories, and I will have one more after that, which is the entire series combined into one long movie. And then today's dress is inspired by this top that I found. So let's get into it, get into the dress. I've already patterned out and cut out with adding a interfacing layer to the bodice when the video starts, but then it will continue on from there.
So here are those panels cut out. I wanted to make sure that the bodice had a lot of structure and it would stay very flat when I wore it, but I didn't have the materials or the knowledge to put in boning, so I used what I had, which was interfacing. Here I'm sewing the panels together. This was pretty tricky for me because I wanted it to be so flat. I ended up adding an extra stitch around each seam, which would help each panel lay flat against each other, but I didn't do that until a little bit after this. So after all of the panels were sewn together, I went and I took my measuring tape and I started adding markers for where each grommet will be. For the other dresses, I used buttons and buttonholes, but I wanted this one to be a little more fancy, so it will have a completely laced back, which also means it's impossible almost to get Ann out of alone, since I have to completely unlace and relace it to get it on and off. Luckily for when I had gone to my camp, I had my aunt to help me lace it up, and I tried to use historical lacing methods for that as well. Here I am going in and putting the little stitches in, which will help keep the bodice flat and each panel to stay nice and neat, while also adding some more structure, since each of those seam lines and like excess bits of fabric will act as a sort of boning, even though they're more flexible than actual boning would be.
So now I have the base of the bodice. It's all sewn together. So what I have to do is I'm going to kind of add up things what looks like these drawings. I'm going to start with the puff sleeves. I'm basically just going to make like a circle or something. And then this is going to be pleated with lace on these areas with some of the beading attached to each.
So just like I said, I went on and I started to make the sleeves. How I ended up doing that was I took just a long rectangle of fabric and I started to pleat it. I didn't want to do a ruffling method like I had for pretty much everything else, because I did want this look to be a lot cleaner. When sewing together those pleats, I added the lace because it's pretty and not much of other reason other than I wanted to add as many lace bits and frills as I could on this garment. So especially on these sleeves, I have definitely a couple layers of lace, different layers of lace. After adding the lace on, I took it to my serger and I sewed them into loops. After doing that, I decided to use the serger and hem the tops of those sleeves. I did this because since it's off the shoulder dress, I wanted to make sure that the tops of the sleeves wouldn't fray depending on how I decided to attach that sort of pleated plaque on top. After I did that, I sewed it onto the bodice and only on the underside because, like I said, it is an off-the-shoulder dress. So after adding on the sleeves and all the lace, this is what it looked like. After that step is where it kind of got more complicated and I definitely got very confused because I am not that good at hand pleating or pleating in general even, and I wanted the, goodness, what's it called? Collar to have that iconic pleating that 1800s dresses would have. I ended up figuring it out, but it really didn't help that the collar itself was curved and not a flat piece. I ended up using an interfacing to help me ensure that those pleats would stay in place, and I added a backing of a flat piece of fabric to double check that even if the interfacing glue did kind of fail, it would still have the shape that I wanted it to have. While sewing that together and making that kind of tube, I added in even more lace so that it's just a very frilly bodice. You know, make it nice and fun. And yes, it was very hard to turn that tube back right side out. But after I did it, I made sure to press everything flat with my hands, and then I ironed it as well. Then once I got that all settled, I hand sewed it. This collar is a loop, so it is a complete circle, and when sewing it onto the garment, onto the bodice, there are no openings. So when I put the bodice on, I have to put it over my head and squeeze myself through that collar line since it is completely attached to the bodice. When attaching it to the bodice, I did hand sew it because I didn't want to see any machine lines, and I wanted to make sure that everything was as accurate as I could possibly get it. After adding on that final detail to the bodice, I moved on to the skirt. The skirt was going to be a lot simpler. It was just a big old circle with a lot of ruffles on it. Unfortunately, I ran out of time to do my intended skirt, But it turned out to be alright, since if you'll remember, or if you had watched the undergarment video, I made a lot of extra ruffles on accident. And I ended up using those ruffles. They came in clutch at the very last second, since I was struggling for time and design, and they really pulled through. And I would like to thank my sister for giving me the idea to use those ruffles, because I was so stressed out of my mind trying to do the original hand beadwork that I had planned. I couldn't think about anything else at the time. But alas, before I could even get there, I had to finish the structure of the skirt. So here I am, simply serging the entire bottom so that I could then go back through and roll hem the entire hem of that circle skirt. After doing the roll hem, I moved on to the top of the skirt and I added in the waistband, which is the same as the other ones. It's simply a long piece of fabric that I folded over and sewed onto the skirt. After sewing it on, I went and I added the buttons on, which are hand sewn, of course, with the buttonholes on the other side, which I used the machine for. Then here are two silly photos of me arguing with Goofy because he was getting all over the white fabric. I'm gonna make it dirty! But this is where I started measuring out my original idea. I was going to make a textile or actually make multiple textiles and drape it around the dress, as you can see from the grid. But it was taking forever. Those are my shoes. And then that's when my sister came to me and was like, actually, if you remember all of those ruffles that you have, just sew those on. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're a genius. So here I am hand tacking on loops for those for the ruffles. And I also added some lace bows around where those tacks were, just to add even more fun things and more lace frills, because you can never have enough, especially not on a beautiful, beautiful ball gown. But after I completely hand sewed the tacks for where I wanted it to drape, I was done. And it couldn't have finished any sooner, because I don't think I've said it in this video, but I'm recording this voiceover 2 years in the future, so I don't remember every single detail, but I'm pretty sure that I was finishing this like the night before I had to leave. This was like midnight the night before I had to leave, and I was hogging my parents' room so that I could hand sew on these details and ruffles to the skirt. But alas, it was all worth it, and now I have some pretty photos, and I felt so pretty when I was wearing the dress, and it was all because of the effort I put in. So let's see.